By 1920, Americans were tired of war abroad and progressive programs at home. The high-minded rhetoric of Woodrow Wilson had lost its appeal. The country was in a conservative mood. Number 29, Warren G. Harding, Republican, 1921 to 1923, 55 years old, from Ohio. Warren Harding is the only president to be elected on his birthday. In his successful campaign, he touted a return to normalcy.
We're not going to do anything big and ambitious. We're going to create a period in which things are quiet and calm.
A former newspaperman, Harding was the 7th president born in the state of Ohio. No one ever accused him of being a cold fish. He was an extrovert, a gambler, a drinker, and allegedly a womanizer. He also played the sousaphone.
He liked to be around people, liked to glad hand, liked to slap people in the back. That's actually a rather valuable political skill.
Harding has been portrayed as someone who wasn't fit to be president, that he lacked intellect and ambition.
People will say that he didn't want to be president or that he didn't have the self-confidence to do it. He did want to be president. He was a savvy man in his politics, and he did have a very strong sense for what he wanted to accomplish.
Harding wasn't the type of president who thought he had all the answers.
Mr. Harding said that he was inviting the best minds into the cabinet. In a very real sense, this was the case. His Secretary of State was Charles Evans Hughes, who was a distinguished man. His Secretary of Commerce was Herbert Hoover. This was a good cabinet.
Harding's most important achievement was the Budget and Accounting Act of 1921. Passed at Harding's urging, it gave the executive branch greater control over federal spending, and for the first time in history, required the president to submit an annual budget to Congress. Harding scored the other great success of his presidency when he convened an international conference in Washington that resulted in an historic arms reduction agreement between the naval powers of the world.
The Washington Naval Conference was the only serious arms limitation arrangement that was made in the 20s and 30s. That was Mr. Harding.
In the summer of 1923, Harding took a train trip west, becoming the first sitting president to visit Alaska. But his health was failing. On July 29th, he arrived at the Palace Hotel in San Francisco and checked into the presidential suite to recuperate. 4 days later, with his wife Florence at his bedside, the president suffered a heart attack. Florence pleaded with the doctors to save him, but it was too late. Harding was dead.
Those people who have any image of Harding at all remember him as a kind of joke, and certainly as a failure. It would be hard for such people to understand the enormity of the response to Harding's death.
It would be a short-lived period of grief and reverence. Less than a year after his death, several scandals came to light that forever shattered Harding's image. The most significant scandal involved Harding's Secretary of the Interior, Albert Fall. He was accused of improperly leasing Navy oil reserves at Elk Hills, California, and Teapot Dome in Wyoming to a pair of wealthy oil men in exchange for an illegal kickback. Teapot Dome, as the affair came to be known, was the most infamous presidential scandal prior to Watergate.
I don't know of any evidence that Harding actually was complicit in these scandals or that he personally benefited from them, but he certainly was guilty of appointing mediocre, not very honest people to very significant positions.
Harding's reputation was further tarnished by the publishing of 2 scandalous books. One insinuated that the president's wife, Florence, had poisoned him. Another was written by Nan Britton, a woman who claimed to have had an affair with Harding and given birth to his daughter. These sensational tales were dubious at best, but widely believed at the time. Today, Harding is remembered more for the scandals that swirled around him, both real and imagined, than anything else. One historian who has re-examined Harding's record thinks history has been particularly unfair to our 29th president.
He was a good president, even verging on an excellent president. His great tragedy was that physically he was unable to live out his term. He was good with the Senate. He was good on foreign affairs. He was good with the budget. And I asked, what more do you wish?
When President Harding died, Vice President Calvin Coolidge was at his father's home in rural Vermont. Coolidge's father, a justice of the peace, swore him in by lantern light over the family Bible. Number 30, Calvin Coolidge, Republican, 1923 to 1929, 52 years old, from Massachusetts.
He was a kind of cramped, somewhat mean-spirited, not very sociable or genial man.
Before being tapped as Harding's vice president, Coolidge had been a lawyer and governor of Massachusetts. The man they called Silent Cal was indeed quiet, and when he did speak, it was in a high, nasal voice. Despite claiming that his only hobby was running for office, Coolidge was an avid fisherman. He also had a dry New England wit.
There's a story of him at a state dinner, and a woman sitting next to him trying to engage him says, I'll bet you, Mr. President, that I can get you to say more than 2 words in the course of this evening. And he turned to her briefly and said, you lose.
Coolidge had a novel way of getting exercise by riding this mechanical horse in his White House bedroom.
The president would ride it before dinner in the evening. He would ride the horse and get all sweaty, get off the horse and go down and eat.
History hasn't recorded whether the president preferred to gallop or trot. Although normally stoic, Coolidge was always game to play dress-up for a good photo opportunity. In 1924, less than a year into his presidency, voters were content to keep cool with Coolidge by electing him to a full term of his own. On March 4th, 1925, he was sworn in by Chief Justice William Howard Taft, the first time in history an ex-president gave the oath of office to a president. During his administration, Coolidge kept a tight rein on the federal budget. He used his veto power to kill pay raises for postal workers and bonuses for World War I veterans. He also lowered taxes twice. His goal was to keep government small and business booming.
He believed in American business as the dominant force in American life. He once said, he who builds a factory builds a temple. He who works there worships there.
Coolidge presided over a period of prosperity, but his economic policies failed to anticipate the future and the calamity of the Great Depression that lay ahead.
Coolidge did what the times seemed to require. If he made a mistake, it was in the economics of the time, which he did not understand, and I think most of the people of his generation did not understand.
The president may have missed the increasing signs of economic instability because his management style was to rely heavily on his cabinet.
The case in point was Andrew Mellon, the Secretary of the Treasury. He was the 3rd richest man in the country, and no recession, not to mention depression, could touch him. And I think he didn't understand what was going on, and Coolidge trusted in Mellon, and thereby made an error.
In 1928, Calvin Coolidge decided not to run for a second term, and his Secretary of Commerce, Herbert Hoover, won the White House. Popular in his day, Coolidge is now largely a forgotten figure, a quiet president who presided over a roaring era. President Harding often hosted poker games at the White House and once gambled away a set of presidential china from Benjamin Harrison's administration.